Okay, I think we're still allowing people in, but we have to start the session. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and welcome to this session arranged by Cambridge Educational Research e-journal, also known as CERJ, and supported by FIRSA, the Graduate Student Organization, and by CERJ, Cambridge Peace and Education Research Group. My name is Basma Hajir. I'm a third-year PhD candidate exploring the field of education and conflict. I've had the privilege of serving as a CERJ chief editor for this past year, and I'm so pleased to be here with you all today in this launching event of Volume 7 of CERJ. As you might all know, CERJ is a graduate-led initiative established in 2014 at the Faculty of Education, University of Cambridge, and it has gone a long way since then, thanks mainly to the collective efforts of our graduate community and to the generous support of some senior members of staff at the faculty. Today, we're here together to reflect on the development of CERJ over this past year and to celebrate the achievements of our graduate community who served as CERJ members of the editorial team, peer reviewers, authors, sub-editors, and also for this year as translators. We're also here today to have a conversation with an exceptional guest whose remarkable body of work has greatly influenced CERJ vision and guided the direction of our work over this past year. I think I will resist the urge to talk more about our guest, as this will be done later by Professor Susan Robertson, CERJ Senior Advisor and the head of our faculty. For now, I'll only say that we feel so delighted, grateful, and honored that CERJ efforts over this past year have been perfectly culminated with having Professor Boaventura de Sousa Santos with us today. Before we start the session, I just would like to briefly run through the structure of this session and a few housekeeping rules and logistics. And to do that, I would like to share my screen. I trust you can see my screen now. So for the next 10 minutes, I will provide an overview of CERJ development over this past year and the content of Volume 7. I will then hand over to Lindsay Burton. Lindsay Burton is the head of FIRSA, the graduate organization at the faculty. Lindsay will deliver a brief note before handing over to Professor Susan Robertson. Professor Susan will also provide a brief note and will kindly introduce our guest. I will then have about a 40-minute conversation with Professor Santos. Before handing over to Nomisha Kurian. Nomisha Kurian is our sub-editor. She will be taking the questions from you. So please, during my conversation with Professor Santos, do use the chat function and type down your questions and send them to Nomisha Kurian because she will be leading the Q&A. So please remember, don't send them to me, send them to Nomisha. And after that, Nomi will hand over back to me to communicate some important acknowledgments before moving on to a very important part of this session, which is announcing Cambridge Editorial Board and Readership Award. This is an award offered by CERJ. We offer this award annually for a winning author whose paper best meet the selection criteria of CERJ. And this part will be covered by our deputy editor, Helena Fernandez. She will then hand over back to me in order to introduce the new CERJ team that has been recently elected at the Faculty of Education, and I will then conclude the session. I think you can all notice that you are all muted now, and I don't know if this is not uncomfortable to you. We would prefer if also the videos are off, mainly because this session is recorded. So just to ensure a better quality of the recording. And this will be only in the first parts of the session. until the end of the Q&A. After that, we aim to make the session more casual. So we will encourage all of you to open your videos, and we will allow also people to interact with us, and because we would love to make people see the faces of whoever contributed to CERJ and the authors and everyone. So yes, and now I will move to cover the first part, which is providing an overview of CERJ development and the content of Volume 7. And in order to do this, I choose to cover some parts of my own editorial note. I choose to do that because I believe that this editorial note captures the main elements that it's very important for us to communicate to CERJ audience. And at the same time, it really provides a good foundation for the following conversation with Professor Santos. I start my editorial note with a more autoethnographic style of writing because I felt that it really helped me to provide a background of our vision and a rationale behind some of the decisions that we have taken. So yeah, now I will start with some parts of my editorial note. So in this note, I say, I set to write this editorial note on 25 September 2020, the 17th anniversary of the death of Edward Said. I scroll down through social media posts commemorating his legacy, and I recall the strong impact his work had on me when I first read it. I still remember how his book, Representations of the Intellectual, struck me as exceptional and awe-inspiring. It was through this work that I also learned about Gramsci's concept of the organic intellectual and about Foucault's distinction between the specific and the universal intellectual. More recently, I have been also deeply engaged in what Sousa Santos calls the post-abyssal researcher. Against the backdrop of this body of work, I was left with the questions that never ceased to run through my mind. What type of intellectual do I want to be? What is my share of responsibility as a scholar? And how do I live up to it? According to Edward Said, the intellectual's role is to challenge and negate both an imposed silence and the normalized quiet of unseen power, wherever and whenever possible. Edward Said urged us to always remain responsible for how we occupy our positions. With this responsibility in mind, we approached our position as an editorial team at CERJ. We found ourselves serving at a uniquely eventful year, from COVID-19 pandemic, police violence in the US, Black Lives Matter protests, ongoing war in Syria, continuous assaults against my people in Palestine, and the persistence of structural racism in our societies and institutions, among others. On a broader geopolitical scale, we have also been attentive to the times we live in, where the scientific knowledge developed in the global north has been turned into the hegemonic way of transforming the world according to one's own needs. In light of this, we started this year by setting CERJ's goals and vision. We endeavor to provide a platform that encourages the mutual enrichment of different knowledge and to shed light on contributions that speak to the poorly represented and to the oppressed. We have been greatly influenced by Santos, who calls for valorizing epistemologies of the South, the types of knowledge that contribute to maximizing the possibilities of success of social struggles. Informed by Santos, we recognize that remaining neutral in global societies characterized by direct structural cultural violence amounts to being on the side of the oppressor. I will now briefly comment on some of the technical and stylistic changes that CERJ has undergone over this past year, and I will then talk a bit about the content of Volume 7 before moving on to discuss some of the concrete steps that we took for its publication and dissemination. Starting with the technical and stylistic changes, It is important to note that during this past year, this journal has undergone a name change. CERJ has been previously known as CERJ. This name change followed a unanimous voting on part of FERSA. Our editorial team has proposed deleting the two words open review from the journal name in order to foreground the rigor of the double-blind peer review process that CERJ articles undergo. In this volume, our articles are also presented in new templates. We ensured to add articles, DOIs, authors, ORCID IDs, Creative Commons licensing information, and logo, and to boost the overall academic and professional outlook of CERJ. As for the content of our articles, Volume 7 is CERJ's largest volume to date. It includes 14 articles. In addition to the significant contributions that this volume offers in multiple areas of education, we are particularly delighted with the increasing number of contributions that conveys the voices of our authors in relation to historical and contemporary social and political struggles. Articles in Volume 7 unpack issues around cognitive justice, indigenous studies, refugees, disability, and ecological balance. They also engage in critiques of neoliberalism and structural injustices in academic institutions. They also engage in enduring histories of injustices like the Holocaust. We are incredibly proud of our authors who reflect the commitment of our graduate community at the Faculty of Education to challenge the normalized quiet of unseen power, to engage in the public space and the larger body of politics. As for the concrete steps that we have taken in pursuit of CERJ's vision for this year, I would like to talk about two areas. First, in addition to written articles, this volume presents an additional short video. And in these videos, authors provide an oral summary of the main arguments of their papers. We have decided to take this step for three main reasons. First, we hope that this will give the ideas presented in our volume a liveliness and an embodied human quality that are absent from the written text. Second, we aim to make our written knowledge more familiar and accessible to a wider range of audience. Third, we drew on Santos, who argues that abyssal science is a monumental science that requires a demonumentalizing intervention. Santos proposes knowledge oralization as one way to demonumentalize knowledges and to open spaces to other ways of knowing. Therefore, this step is a way to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. It is important, however, to say that our attempt to oralize knowledge in this volume remains a first incomplete step. More nuanced work is needed if we would like to meaningfully help fulfill Santos' call. Moving forward, I encourage future editorial teams to take this a step further in a way that truly makes our knowledge more familiar to the experiences of the masses. Future authors can be encouraged to avoid monological narratives and to share short dialogic films instead. They can attempt to avoid using technical language and to focus on foregrounding how their work contributes to societies and to strengthening social struggles. Second, in this volume, we present the abstracts of our articles in two more different languages, Spanish and Arabic. This step has been prompted by our belief in the widely recognized epistemological, cultural, and political relevance of a plurilingualism. At a time when linguistic imperialism is part of the dominant politics of knowledge, we have taken this step as a gesture to intentionally incorporate the richness of other languages into our publications. This year, we chose two widely spoken languages, Arabic and Spanish. I encourage future editorial teams to incorporate more languages, especially more local languages from the Global South. In light of the concrete steps that we have taken this year, as well as the involvement of a considerable range of our articles in wider public issues. We were tempted to frame this volume as an attempt to contribute to the efforts of decolonizing knowledge in the faculty. However, we have decided to avoid a too easy adoption of decolonizing discourse. We turned to Tuck and Young, who say that decolonization is not a metaphor, and who warn against superficial moves to innocence. Contemplating the different types of struggle that Indigenous people continue to suffer from in different parts of the world brings Tuck and Young's argument home. Thinking of the illegal occupation, annexation, and settler colonization of Palestinian lands, we come to better understand the superficiality of claiming that what we have done can be called decolonial work. We also realized that as long as nowhere in our call for papers have we encouraged authors to grapple with the breadth of Britain's colonial legacy, its past active involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, and how these are deeply connected with the injustices and struggles that persist today, then a claim that we are contributing to decolonizing knowledge will be only a performative attempt to add value to CERJ's repetition at the expense of the experiences of people living real struggles. We thereby chose to remain accountable and to comprehend the scope and worth of what we have attempted to do in this volume. Through Volume 7, CERJ has attempted to claim a space, to seize a moment, and to somehow innovate on the margins. What we have done this year is a gesture, a half step, and a commitment to be more actively involved in FIRSA's campaigns and to play a role in making our faculty an inclusive, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, and a cognitively just space. We in CERJ recognize that we have a choice of what social and political struggles to support, and we embrace our responsibility and duty to align ourselves with the oppressed. It is thus crucial that we develop a critical distance that liberates us from the shackles of systems and frameworks that tacitly direct and benefit from our work. In this respect, we might have to take seriously the feminist insight that the personal is political. The political does reproduce itself through the personal. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to remain attentive to the dangerous ways in which our own individual scholarly work might unintentionally complement and extend institutional or global structural violence. We must endeavor to comprehend these connections and to understand the deep relationality that links struggles against institutional injustices and struggles to reinvent ourselves as scholars. Finally, we in CERJ have high regard for the gifts and intellects of our graduate community to continue to work for our vision of what institutional spaces we would like to occupy. We are immensely proud of the sense of community and solidarity that continues to develop among us in a powerful way. It is indeed, as Angela Davis says, it is in the collectivities that we find reservoirs of hope and optimism. And with this note, I will hand over now to Lindsay Burton, FIRSA's head. Lindsay is a third-year PhD student, and she's the head of FIRSA, the graduate organization at the Faculty of Education. Over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Basma. And hi, everyone. It's really great to see over 100 participants at this really wonderful, exciting event. I will keep these remarks brief, as I've largely been a spectator, a very impressed spectator to the proceedings of this fine publication this year. I want to start by acknowledging the efforts of the entire CERJ team, particularly its elected editors and managers. Editor-in-Chief Basma Hajir, Deputy Editor Helena Fernandez, Events Manager Gongbao Wang, and Research Communications Editor Kongxing Li. Elected members of FIRSA are volunteers who do their work solely out of a belief that their contributions make the graduate community at the Faculty of Education a better place. And this year's CERJ team has not only provided a space for students to share their research and get experience with publishing, but they've also done so in the middle of a uniquely challenging and disruptive year. Despite having to work remotely since March, the team has put together an amazing publication that achieves all of the aforementioned goals while also working to further the causes of anti-racism and anti-oppression. These are goals that the FIRSA committee has been working towards with renewed energy in the past several months, and the production of this 7th volume of CERJ adds to that effort admirably. On a more operational note, as Basma noted earlier, this year's CERJ team has also undertaken the significant but changing the journal's name from the Cambridge Open Review Education Research e-journal to the Cambridge Education Research e-journal to better reflect the journal's working procedures and policies. This may sound like a standard thing to do, but again, this team is made up of volunteers who have undertaken this extra work out of a commitment to providing the best service and product possible on behalf of the Faculty of Education graduate community. None of these excellent accomplishments would have been possible without the stellar leadership of Basma Hajir, the journal's editor-in-chief. I've known Basma since we started at the Faculty of Education in 2017 as MPhil students, and I know many of you will agree with me when I state that her hard work, dedication, eloquence, and insight have been crucial and necessary factors in making this one of, if not the best edition of CERJ to date. If we were in a physical space together, I would ask everyone to please give Basma a round of applause. But as it is, if everyone could take a minute and click the little applause button, the reaction button on your Zoom interface down at the bottom. We'll have to make do with that for now. I'll make sure to send her an audio clip of people applauding for her to listen to later. And I'll finish up by thanking Professor Susan Robertson, head of faculty, for her continued support of all FIRSA endeavors, and particularly this wonderful journal. We are lucky as an organization to have Susan and other members of faculty solidly in our corner as we work to contribute to and better the Faculty of Education's graduate community. Thank you all for coming to this wonderful event. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening, and I will now hand over to Professor Robertson.
Helena, could you please unmute Professor Susan?
Wonderful. So thank you so much for that wonderful introduction to this latest issue. I must say, as the head of the Faculty of Education, I'm just so proud to be a part of a collection of scholars who take seriously the kind of issues that Boaventura de Sousa Santos has been writing about for some time. It feels rather personal, so not just as head of faculty, but to say that at a particular moment, I did travel to Coimbra to interview Boaventura for the journal that myself and Roger Dale were just establishing, and that would have been around about 2003, 2004. I'd been aware of Boaventura's work in the 1990s, actually, his wonderful, wonderful book, Toward a New Legal Common Sense. And if you want to know something about Boaventura, it's really quite important to perhaps start with some of those early texts, because what he's actually doing there is to actually look at kind of in a close-up way, the way in which the project of modernity, particularly, and its commitment to science and a particular kind of reason, in some way actually falls out of balance with itself. Its emancipatory potential, Boaventura tells us, has actually been eclipsed by fundamentally its regulatory kind of element. So the interview that we did, which was really memorable for us, and I must say, Boa, it's hugely quoted. You're one of the few people, I think, that have really put your finger on not just one or two things, but certainly to do with globalization. And let me just read this out. And this comes from our interview published in 2004 in the new journal that myself and my colleague had established. He says, I will start from my definition of globalization. It's a process by which a given entity reaches the globe by enlarging its own ambit, and by doing so develops the capacity or the prerogative of naming as local all rival entities. So here what we can now understand is many things can be globalized, and in this case modernity, the knowledge systems of the North, and so on. Boaventura is just such an amazing giant in the world of kind of problematizing knowledge production and the ways in which certain knowledges become hegemonic. I knew about you, Boa, because of your work you're doing with Steve Storr in Portugal and around globalization. I also knew about your work because you were so instrumental in establishing the World Social Forum. Your user's manual that you put out in 2004 isn't really a user's manual of a conventional sort. What you encourage us to do, and later iterations of these ideas pop up, for example, in your beautiful book, The End of the Cognitive Empire. But let me just remind all of us some of the elements that make up a complex conceptual grammar that you've been developing and over time. You identify what you talk about as the sociology of absences, and try to encourage us to think about emergences. We are encouraged to think about the monologics here, and you'll be naming things like time, status, productivity, and so on. Some of my students have also been very interested in your sociology of rebellion and have written PhDs on that. Your encouragement to us to think about ecologies of knowledges, and that's incredibly productive. So we're not thinking of the knowledge economy, but we're thinking of economies of knowledge, economies of knowledge and or economies of knowledge and so on. So pluralizing relational work. Your work on cognitive justice is profoundly important. What I would want to say is I can't think of a better person to be welcoming virtually to our faculty and to the University of Cambridge. I hope on another occasion, Boa, when we can actually move around, that there'd be a moment when we can encourage you, entice you to Cambridge. But I've been, I was at the meeting in Argentina about 2 years ago where you spoke. And let me just say, it was to an audience of about 10,000, if not more. Your work is hugely important, and any young scholar looking to find a scholar of your kind of stature with the kinds of concepts that we need to understand today's world. And let me just finish with a little bit of the discussion in the interview, and you reminded us of social fascism. And I think particularly if we're thinking of the rise of authoritarian populism, that's a particularly pertinent concept. Let's hope things in the United States take a slightly different turn to where they've been over the last 4 years or so, but that has to be writ large and across multiple spaces. So Basma and the CERJ team, what a wonderful occasion, and thank you for staging it. And it's a great tribute, not just to the volume, but the political commitments. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Susan, for such a great introduction to Professor Santos and his incredible work. And thank you so much for joining us and being with us. It's such an honor to have you also as well. You've always been greatly supportive to CERJ, and it's really such an honor to have you with us in this session today. Professor Santos, thank you so much for being with us today.
Unmute.
Helena, could you please double check that?
Yes.
Okay.
That one. Hello. Good afternoon. Here, I'm now in my village. I'm not in Coimbra exactly, where I met Susan many years ago. I'm in my village. In fact, my parents lived here, used to live here, and I wrote some of my books here, 30 kilometers outside Coimbra. And thank you so much, Susan. When Basma mentioned to me that you were the head of the faculty and you'd be introducing me, it was such a sweet, sweet moment for me, because I remember very well your coming to my center at the time and having such fabulous interview. By the way, Susan, we are going to publish a book of interviews, and of course, your interview is being translated, and I'll get in touch with you about that. But because they want to put together my interviews. It was so wonderful, and I'm so pleased that you are here in this position, working with these beautiful, wonderful students. And thank you, Basma, and your colleagues for the invitation. I was touched. As I told you, I'm very busy, but I don't miss very good invitations and opportunities. And yours was a wonderful one. And in fact, in reciprocity and as a gift, a reciprocal gift between us, I'd like to dedicate my remarks to the liberation of the Palestinian people, which are victims of an unjust, illegal, colonial occupation for so many years. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm ready for the questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm so honored and happy to have the opportunity to share the next 40 minutes with you. And I'm still trying to, such a heartwarming gift you just mentioned. It means a lot to me. Yeah, we'll talk about this later, I think. For now, we will start our conversation. And I would like to start it with a more theoretical discussion of your philosophy of the post-Abyssal and discuss its relation to other post-colonial and decolonization discourses before moving on to some of the practical implications of your work. Mm-hmm. Professor Santos, in your work, you state that there is no social justice without cognitive justice. You call for valorizing epistemologies of the South. And you also say that the epistemologies of the South exist today so that they will not be necessary one day. I would really like us to start with laying out the basics. So it would be great if we can clarify to everyone with us today, what do we mean exactly by cognitive justice? What kinds of knowledges can be redeemed by the epistemologies of the South? What South are we talking about here? Because I don't think it's the geographical South. And what do we exactly mean when we say that they exist today so that they will not be necessary one day?
That's a wonderful question, Basma. I'm very glad to try to answer it. Of course, the idea of cognitive justice is a simple one in a sense, and every simple ideas are very complex in nature, as we know that. Is cognitive justice means justice among knowledges, among different ways of knowing. It doesn't mean that all of them are equally valid for the same purposes, but at least they should be able to enter a wide and broad conversation of humankind, as John Dewey would formulate it. And what we have seen in the past centuries, as a matter of fact, is that so many ways of knowing, so many knowledge have been destroyed by hegemonic ways of thinking and of knowing that have been imposed upon them and have destroyed them. I call this epistemicide. And therefore, as long as there is epistemicide, we need epistemologies of the South. If the epistemicide goes away as a plague that is so vastly on us today, then probably we don't need the epistemology of the South, because we need just that to denounce all the destruction of knowledge, of the waste of experience, because all social experience, it always go together with knowledges. And therefore, when experience is wasted because it is ignorant, because it's illegal, because it's local, because it's lazy, because unproductive, because it's, savage, because it's, everything. All these experiences mean that the knowledges that support them are also considered so. And if it were a kind of a liberal debate among different ideas and knowledges, it would be fine if some knowledge was considered more better than another, more valid than another. The problem with the hegemonic epistemologies of the North is that they have not allowed this conversation, this evaluation, the confrontation with different knowledge, because they have started from the idea of an epistemological privilege. So the only valid knowledge is the one that we are providing. And this knowledge, therefore, does not allow any other knowledges, because all the other knowledges are not real knowledges. They are superstitions, they are opinions, they are subjective, they are retrogressive, they are ignorant forms of life. So under these conditions, no conversation is possible. Many people say, well, but are you really in favor of relativism? No. Of course not, because any idea of a liberation of society cannot accept that everything goes or anything goes. No, we know which side are we on. We are on the side of liberation, of struggling against oppression. So nothing is equally valid for us, but we should allow for a conversation so that we could determine what kinds of knowledges are probably better used for certain purposes, because we know that some knowledges are very good for some purposes and others for other purposes. Weizsäcker, a great philosopher of science, would say, well, science, philosophy of science, for instance, cannot really respond some of the fundamental questions of science. What is the meaning of science? What is the meaning of life? This is not a scientific question, and therefore there are many other questions and many issues that are not captured by science itself. So there's a plea for a conversation, but a very unequal conversation, because knowledge is not just that. Knowledge is also power. And therefore hegemonic knowledges are hegemonic powers also. And of course, one has called for the other. And it is this mixture, this toxic mixture of power and knowledge that have destroyed so much knowledge around the world. And of course, not so knowledge, but also social experience. People's genocide always goes together with epistemicide. And these ideas we should bear in mind while we are doing this. And therefore, the South here is not geographical, as you just said, because in the South there is a North. You know, Edward Said knew that very well when he spoke about Little Europes. All over the South, you have the elites and many of the universities, the Eurocentric universities that really reproduce all the Western-centric hegemonic knowledge, and therefore they are part of the North, not part of the South. The South here is epistemic, and what do I mean by that? I think that we can identify two main paradigms of knowledge, and the epistemologists of the South are offering a third paradigm. It's just a proposal, a very plural one. The first one, as you know, is Hegel's proposal, is the knowledge after the struggle. As knowledge said, the howl of Minerva comes at the end, at dusk, when the wars and the struggles are over, and therefore everything becomes calmer. And then she starts to fly. And it's when knowledge emerges. The problem is that at that very moment, the only knowledge that remains is the knowledge of the winners. The knowledge of the losers have been lost, have been destroyed. And therefore, this paradigm of knowledge after the struggle doesn't serve us well if you want to bring about cognitive justice. A second one was proposed by Karl Marx. Marx, in fact, proposed the paradigm of knowledge before the struggle. And he did that in the thesis on Feuerbach, particularly in thesis 11. Well, Karl Marx in that piece and many others, what he decided to do is that to prepare and to elaborate on a theory and knowledge that could be before the struggle, because the working class was not a class in itself. It was a class in itself, an Ansicht in German, but not a für sich class. That is to say, the workers had no consciousness of their own historical role as the subjects of liberation, oppression, under capitalism. And therefore, in order for them to become aware of their historical role, we needed a different kind of science, a knowledge that was preparing them for the struggle. So knowledge before the struggle. Well, the 20th century brought us lots of disappointments with this paradigm as well. And therefore, I think that for many reasons that I can't, in my limits that you have given me, I can't go into that. But what I'm saying is that neither of these paradigms works well for us. And I think that we think if we look at the struggles of the peoples around the world, and Susan mentioned all my work from the very beginning of the World Social Forum, in which we met, where we brought together social movements, organizations from all over the world. And in fact, we are preparing now a new meeting in Mexico as soon as the pandemic allows us to do. We can see that all this knowledge, all these different movements, they have their own knowledge that was born in struggle. It was oftentimes there was parts of that knowledge was built before the struggles and others after other struggles, but mainly they were knowledges born in struggle. So the epistemology of the South are the knowledges born in struggle. Is an effort to validate it, to bring in, and we are going to discuss this, how we do that, the struggles of people that have been struggling in the world against the injustice produced by capitalism, colonialism, and heteropatriarchy. And these three modes of domination have been all along in modernity. We can speak about that later on, but I'll try to give my idea how these three dominations have been fully integrated in the last 4 centuries. And therefore, the epistemologists of the South are trying to bring together all this wonderful, marvelous, immense landscape of knowledges that have been produced by anti-capitalists, anti-colonialists, anti-patriarchal movements. But unfortunately, they have been separated on one side, and on the other side, they have not belonged to knowledge. They have not been considered knowledge by hegemonic hegemonies. On the contrary, they have been considered as something that we can discard. And usually when we discard knowledges, we also discard the people that abide their lives and go their lives by those kinds of knowledges. So this is to tell you that if we manage to liberate ourselves for this hegemony, that it is an imposition, basically, because it's made of power, the power of guns and cannons from the 17th century onwards, that then becomes hegemonic. If we don't have that, if we allow a conversation, and then we may decide which knowledges are more valid and by which criteria, that is to say, for which purposes in our society. The pandemic is, calling on us to ask these questions, of course. So once you have that, then the epistemologists of the South are not necessary. They are really an epistemological and political strategy to bring about a bit more justice, cognitive justice in the world.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you've just incisively summarized the fundamentals of your theoretical framework. And I would like to follow up specifically on the idea of valorizing other epistemologies and valorizing other ways of knowing, because Professor Santos, this is such an important endeavor, right? But it's at the same time, it can be quite tricky, challenging, and it can be a very dangerous area to navigate through. I'm involved, for example, and I read a lot on post-colonial theory, and I sometimes feel that there is a very fine line that separates a positive and a possibly damaging valorizing of other epistemologies or other ways of knowing. If we look at the field of post-colonial studies, for example, we see some theorists who make a career out of uncritical valorizing of other epistemologies. So they engage in critiquing Western metaphysics. They remain attentive to the limitation of narratives, which is all great and needed. But what can be problematic, I think, is that they seem as if they want to retrieve the pure non-West. And I think I'm talking here about specifically those theorists who are so impacted by post-structuralism and who sometimes uncritically adopt discourses of extreme relativism. And you've just talked about this a while ago. I feel as if they want to preserve the authentic natives lest they become contaminated by the West. And they also start from a position that accepts some existing dichotomies. Like, for example, they ascribe modernity, reason, rationality, science to the West, while emotion, art, spirituality to the Eastern or Southern way of knowing. And by doing this, they sometimes unintentionally reinforce cultural essentialism, and they ignore the complexity of history and culture. And really most dangerous and sometimes irritating to me of all is that they contribute to erasing history. Because for me, sometimes I struggle with the very notion of Western modernity, because Western Enlightenment has been greatly impacted by the intellectual work of Arabic, Islamic, Chinese, and Indian scholars, right? So I think my main question here is twofold. From the perspective of epistemologies of the South, first, does post-colonial theory needs to be decolonized? And second, how can we valorize other ways of being and knowing, but without unintentionally forcing cultural essentialism?
Oh, well, it's a fabulous question, and of course it would take us for, I think, for a seminar-long conversation, because it's very to the point, and I'm very glad to answer in the limits of time that we have. Of course, the epistemology of the South that I've been proposing, the epistemology here is a kind of an occupation, occupation with a K. I mean, we're trying to occupy epistemology because, in a sense, epistemology is a tradition in the West in which we are talking about the validity of separate knowledges, practices that have nothing to do with the rest of the world. They are just separate knowledges, independent activities. Our universities, in a sense, are a good expression and manifestation of that. While many non-academic and non-Western knowledges very often do not, many of the vernacular or popular knowledges, feminist knowledges, rural knowledges, indigenous knowledge, and so on, they are not to be separated from the practices in which they are constitutive. So it's part of the practice. It's very difficult to separate these knowledges from the practices in which they take place. So it is really a problem that we can discuss later. But at this point, what we are questioning, it's a very important question, because I have felt that very much. And probably the reason why I speak about the epistemology of the South and not the decolonization or decoloniality or post-coloniality is that for many, many reasons. But let's state a few of them that may be clear. To begin with, I mean, the post-colonial studies and decolonial studies very often propose that, or presuppose that the domination in our modern world is just colonialism. And they tend to try to show that is the matrix of our world is just colonialism. I don't think so. I think that is capitalism, colonialism, and patriarchy. And what is really new about modern domination is that colonialism and patriarchy existed before capitalism, but they were reconfigured in order to serve capitalism. Why? Because capitalism, as salaried labor, from which the exchange value is extracted, cannot sustain itself without highly devalued labor and without non-paid labor. And this highly devalued labor and non-paid labor has been provided by bodies that have been racialized and sexualized. So bodies that have to be degraded and degraded ontologically, and colonialism and patriarchy does that. And therefore it is impossible to exist capitalism without colonialism and patriarchy. So it doesn't make any sense just to focus on decolonization if you don't engage also in anti-capitalism and anti-patriarchy. In fact, my main idea here is that domination from the 17th century is really a bundle of domination of three main dominations. They are not the only dominations. There are political, religion, maybe one form of domination. The caste system is another domination. Ableism is another domination. But they tend to be satellite dominations. They are at the service of these three main dominations, and they work together. I could give you an example. For instance, take Brazil in recently, where the Bolsonaro coming to power, capitalism became much more aggressive. When capitalism becomes more aggressive, immediately the genocide of black kids, of youth in the cities starts. That is to say, racism and that form colonialism, racism starts. The genocide of black kids in the peripheries of Rio and Fortaleza. At the same time, feminicide increases. That is to say, patriarchy also increases. Therefore, these three dominations work together. What is the drama of our time is that while domination acts together, our resistance is fragmented. We have organized social movements. Some social movements are anti-capitalist. How many of them have been racist and sexist? Some feminist movements have been racist and they have been pro-capitalists. And many anti-colonial and anti-racial movements have been highly sexist and have been pro-capitalist. As long as domination works together and the resistance is fragmented, we don't get out of this domination. So the epistemology of the South tries to, on one side, to bring together all these three dominations together in the process of knowledge is born in struggle. But the second thing is that probably for our origin, post-colonial studies and many of the decolonial studies started in cultural studies department, philosophy department, literature department. And very often, particularly in the early stages, they really used basically the Northern epistemologies to criticize it. It's not new. Foucault did that, Deleuze did that, many others have done that, right? Nietzsche, of course, did that, right? But they never engage with the other knowledges on the other side of the line, of the abyssal line, as called it, because they were never prepared or trained or interested in bringing in the experiences of other peoples, because they themselves were inside their own universities and their academic universities, and therefore the struggle was precisely and very often just an academic struggle. And as long, I'm not diminishing the importance of academic struggles, and we may speak about that later on, but there are many other struggles in which knowledges are involved, but they are not academic. And therefore, what was important is that, the Western modernity is such a voracity that it absorbs everything that is against it very, very easily. And I saw many of the post-colonial rivalries emerging in different departments in the USA very clearly from the 90s onward, in which they were reproducing the same rivalries, academic rivalries of the past among liberal theories. And when I saw that, I said, well, it is necessary to bring seriously into the conversation on non-academic knowledges, other kinds of knowledge, the knowledge that are out there, and therefore are very difficult to get hold of. And all your initiatives here are absolutely fundamental. I'm very pleased to know that you have the beginning of engaging with this plurality when you bring in oral presentation of the article, when you expand the language scope of the articles, because they have to be in written language and the hegemonic languages have been the main instruments of domination in here. So we have to go beyond this field to see if we can extract other kinds of knowledge. And sometime, it's another amazing thing is that usually the tendency to look for the outside, to criticize the Western tradition, you throw the baby out with the bath of water. That is to say, because you are not concerned with real struggles, but with academic struggles, you get rid of the Western knowledge, which sometimes is precious for your struggle, if it is not just an academic struggle. I've been very involved, and that was for me was the most distressing thing. Where did I learn that? I learned that from a great liberator, a great leader of liberation against Portuguese colonialism, Amilcar Cabral, that very, very early on said, well, some of the knowledge that the colonizer brought to us, we have to use it. You cannot discard it. It may be useful. But then we should be we that select what kind of knowledge we want and what kind of knowledge we don't want. Well, later on, after the World Social Forum, I've been so much involved with, for instance, in the struggles of agrotoxics. That is to say, pesticides, insecticides in the industrial agriculture that is put poison in our food and is poisoning the workers, of course, right? And in this movement, it is very clear that we do, Susan was recalling the ecology of knowledges. We do that all the time. We bring in the knowledge of agronomers, biochemists, biologists, engineers, and so on, and we bring together with them the knowledge of the peasants that are in the fields, seeing and knowing what is going on with their food, with their brains, with their bodies, with kids in those rural areas that have brain tumors when they are almost kids, and or young people that is unknown in other parts of the world because of glyphosate and other poisonous products of these pesticides of the 5th generation or 4th generation. So we see that in concrete life, we see the ecologies of knowledges. The decolonial thinking in sense has allowed itself to be encapsulated inside the academic knowledge and struggles. And because of that, in a sense, it lost the critique of the other knowledges that we could bring in, Eastern knowledges. And in fact, at Cambridge, we have one wonderful colleague, and I knew him very early on, and then he wrote several pieces, which I'm talking about Jack Good. He was a fellow of St. John's College, that at the end of his life became so accurately aware and much aware of this alternation between the East and the West. And we could see, for instance, the several renaissances, the East and West, several books, late books of his. And in spite of some limitations, I'm not going into that, but the theft of history and other books in which you can see that, for instance, Western modernity, borrowed a lot of knowledge from the East, from India, from Eurasia, so to say, from India and from China. And therefore, whatever is claimed as Western is not really Western. In fact, was developed much earlier, or it was developed later on this and that. So you look the idea of porosity among different kinds of knowledges. What is missing, and of course, Jack Cody was not interested in this, but I am interested, is that what is the criterion by which we combine articulated knowledges? And when you see that is on the criterion of the struggle is very important and crucial for us, we can see how we go along to select these kinds of knowledges. And once you do that, it's very clear, Basma, if you are in a struggle, you can see that all cultures have different versions. Some are what I call the fortress versions. That is to say, they close themselves in, and our universities usually are these kinds of versions, but not necessarily so. And then they have the hospitality versions, the versions that are open to other cultures. They are more porous. What happens with Western culture happens with any other kinds of knowledge. There are different versions. And some may take us to identitarian ghettos. They enclose ourselves in a ghetto. This is an invitation to disaster, because what it's trying to do is what I just said, dividing us. But that's the rule of capitalism, is the rule and divide, by dividing. And when it's almost a self-infliction that the movements and organizations do upon themselves, is to engage in all these identitarian ghettos that in fact separate us. Of course, there are very serious problems, and I don't have time to address one day. If I come back to when the pandemic allows me to come to Cambridge, as Susan now just said, we can't discuss that. For instance, the experience. I can't have the personal experience of a woman, or a black person. So there are some things that are intransmissible. And this is very important to retain. A Dalit, there's an experience that is intransmissible to a Brahman in India. And in the end of the cognitive empire, I have a discussion on that about precisely this precise topic with my friends from India. So, but beyond that, it is possible communication, because intercultural translation is between two extremes, neither incommensurability nor a complete transparency. There are many things in your culture that I will never understand, probably. And there are things in my culture that we'll probably not understand. But the things that we can share are sufficient for us to be together in a struggle against domination, against oppression, against capitalism, against colonialism, and against patriarchy. And this pragmatism that we have to encourage, and for that, we have to have these other conceptions, and we have to be very critical, because, you know, if you work with movements, we know that. I've been working with indigenous people. I have seen many indigenous leaders, corrupt leaders, selling their own land, which they cannot, to buy a Mercedes-Benz, which they cannot ride because there are no roads in the forest. Am I going from this to deduce that all indigenous people are corrupt? Of course not. The idea of the West is this: you romanticize, either you denigrate or destroy the other, or you romanticize it. And once you romanticize, then you get very frustrated if one of them is corrupt. They're humans. I mean, they are claiming to be humans. And the abyssal line of Western knowledge is what prevents them from being fully human. And my last example, Basma, we are in Europe now. You can see that in last recent years, almost 20 people drowned in the Mediterranean Sea. Was there any crisis in Europe? Any political crisis? Nothing happened. Not even the United Nations were much moved by that. Imagine that these people were European citizens or North American, USA citizens. It would be a major crisis in the world. But they were just immigrants. They were subhuman. They were discardable people. Colonialism and patriarchy was there at work to create the ontological degradation so that they can be disposed of. So it is against this that we are here. And therefore, this struggle is not trivial. It is a very important struggle which has to be conducted inside universities, but of course, most of it outside them. And there are many other things that, you know, the decolonial genealogies. In fact, Basma, it's just almost firsthand. I can tell you that I'm about to finish an entry, a very long entry for the handbook of Oxford Handbook of Literature. And they asked me to write the entry on post-coloniality and decoloniality. So we'll see some of these ideas better developed in that piece that I'm about to finish and tender to the publisher. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Santos. I would certainly be very interested in reading that piece when it's published. And I think you've comprehensively answered my question. And you highlighted this important point that somehow distinguish post-colonial or decolonial discourses around seeing capitalism, colonialism, and patriarchy as interconnected, while, for example, the response for them can be fragmented. So this is a very important point that epistemologies of the South and post-abyssal thinking highlights. I would move on to my third question. I'm skipping a question that I wanted to ask you because I have 10 minutes and I really would like to give the audience about 15 minutes for their questions. And in this last question, I would like to move on to the practical implications of all these theoretical framework of yours. And I would really like to focus on our own context, the University of Cambridge, because in a context like Cambridge, Professor Santos, an elitist university so deeply entangled with colonialism and patriarchy, some scholars, whether students or members of staff, they sometimes push back against bottom-up decolonization movements. And their argument is that quality indicators that make us the best in the world are to do with whom we exclude and whom we don't allow in through our doors rather than whom we include. In other words, I think these arguments, what they're saying is that the structural and the institutional violence in Cambridge is not really a byproduct. It's rather what makes Cambridge, Cambridge. It's what makes Cambridge the excellent institution that it is. And these voices reflect worries about the future of the university. So there's like, what's going to happen to the name of Cambridge if we decolonize? And I think my question to you here is that amid this complexity and from the perspective of post-abyssal thinking, is a university like Cambridge capable of reform, or are we beyond redemption? And if the earlier, I hope, what are the types of structural changes that we might push for? And what are some guidelines or principles for actions that we as scholars and researchers, both students and members of staff, can hopefully take to challenge existing institutional violence, or to at least avoid complementing or extending it through our work?
Well, Basma, yes, I'm very glad to answer this. It's a Cambridge problem. It's also a Coimbra problem at different level. Is a problem in different contexts. But let's take this one. That's your context, and I'm very pleased to engage with that. Look, Basma, I think that we are at a time, from a perspective of the epistemology of the South, who have to have some reservation vis-a-vis the institutions. We cannot trust unconditionally the institutions in which we are in, be they universities or the state, because all of them have been molded by the hegemonic epistemologies of the North all along. And in fact, they have been the instruments of reproduction of the abyssal line for many, many centuries. Therefore, we cannot expect that these institutions from one day to the next are going to undo themselves, because it's their own integrity that they see it's being at stake. So I think that we have to work in our universities with one foot inside and one foot outside. That is to say, with some mental attitude that allows you to build the counter-university inside the university. That is to say, in the last chapter of The End of the Cognitive Empire, my chapter is on from the university to the pluriversity to the subversity. That is to say, we have to create the discomfort. We have to lead out, we scholars, and particularly your generation, students and young scholars, and not so young scholars, but scholars that are very much aware of the abyssal line. What they have to do are two things which I think are mainly important in this context. The first one is that to acknowledge the role of the university in being part of this abyssal line. Last year, before the pandemic, I was in Bristol and in Glasgow, and I saw the discussion and the conversation taking place there on the decolonization of university, which is in fact the title of one of my books, Decolonizing the University, and in which I'm trying to address this issue. And we have to denounce the ways in which the projects, the country projects, were also abyssal projects, because they were excluding and excluding projects and so on and so on. But as again, we have to understand that some valid knowledge have been developed there. We cannot discard these kinds of knowing, this knowledge. We have to engage in idea, what I would call an intercultural translation. In a sense, your students and scholars, particularly those that come from other backgrounds, they have to understand, they have to be intercultural translators. That is to say, they cannot allow themselves to have an idea that they didn't know anything before coming in at Cambridge. They have their own knowing, their own ways of knowledge. They have their own wisdom. They have their own philosophy, their communities, their histories, their ancestries. They were precious, and they are precious, and they should not be abandoned, because any system of knowledge is also a system of ignorances. And therefore, by being very knowledgeable at Cambridge, you will run the risk of becoming an ignorant of our own, or discarding or being an ignorant of your own culture. You have to do this ecology of knowledges, and we have to bring that into your work, and it is possible. But now there is a second area, and the second a second strategy is very important, and it's very hard now. Why? Because in most recent years, capitalism have been penetrating the universities at a degree that was not before. very, very much. Well, it was in the English case with the charter universities was a special case. Most countries were with public universities funded by the states and so on. But in the last 30 years, after neoliberalism, we have seen the development of what we call university capitalism, or the idea that the universities, in fact, are a very good object of profitability, of capitalist profitability. And in some cases, for the public universities, because the governments, because of neoliberalism, are not interested anymore in the national projects, but in global projects. They have been funding the global universities, which are a very small minority of universities. And therefore, that they have developed this idea of the ranking of universities. It's the most atrocious and hostile idea to knowledge that has been developed, is the idea of ranking. So that to say that my knowledge has an exchange value. That is to say, a course at my university has not the same value. Even if I'm there, if many people, first-class people there, then because of ranking, my knowledge cannot be at your level because you are at a higher ranking. Why was this done? It was done basically because they want that the university services, it is being still discussed at the organization, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is that university courses can be traded like any other product. So you can trade a Cambridge sociology course, educational course, is already being done, but it's being done at a lower level and a lower scale. And the large scale is business administration schools. But at large scale, they want to do that, and they want rankings because they want a kind of a commodity value for our knowledge. And as a result, they have proletarianized all the faculty there, where the outputs, where the writing in impact journals, what the deliverables, and so on. We have to play this game, and that's the problem here that I want to. It's very complex for us, because we have to play this game, because otherwise we are ousted of the university, or you don't get promoted, and you have your own family. You have to take care of that. And of course, you are playing the game, but you can ever play the game to the limit of selling out your identity and your integrity. And therefore, we have to run a kind of a double life. We have to do that, but we have to do other things. We have to help our communities outside the university. We have to work in our own languages. I know, for instance, it's very dramatic for me. I'm a native Portuguese speaking, but I know that any article that I publish in English is more valuable 10 times, 20 times than an article in Portuguese. And probably the same happens with you. So I know this. So I have to write very often, and I do in English. But then I go on writing in Portuguese for my people and with other struggles, probably other topics. It is a pity that some of these books are not published in English, because I'm more concerned with dealing with people in non-English speaking people. So I think that we have to be much better than the liberal, traditional, conventional scholars, because we have to do what a great Cuban intellectual, he was never considered part of the decolonial group of people, Roberto Retamar. It's a great intellectual. He died last year. I was a very good friend of his. And he's published a wonderful collection of essays, Whole Caliban. And it's really a very fundamental. What Roberto said very often to all of us was that we have to be better, because we have to know their tradition, and we know our tradition. The fact that we are better is that we try to be very knowledgeable in the English-speaking tradition, but we know other traditions, and they don't very often. And the language issue has been an issue in all these studies. And in this entry, we'll see how many post-colonial, decolonial work was left out of the screen because it was not published in English. And therefore, people were just lingering, and at the most, they were reading in French or in Spanish, not even French, very little of it French. But that's why some authors were left behind or ignored. So I think that language, linguistic or linguicide has also been committed in this process. So I think it's a difficult time for us, but it's also an exciting time, Basma. I'm a tragic optimist always. I know the difficulties, and it's today much more difficulties. And in the United States, I see these difficulties. For the younger faculty particularly, it's really dramatic what's going on, because now is also religious conservatism that is coming upon us. It's a toxic mixture of a capitalistic intervention and conservative religious intervention. It's atrocious. Some of them are being persecuted. And I'm talking about the USA, but I could be talking also about Brazilian scholars at this point, or many other countries in Latin America. And we have seen that in Africa all along. So these, and that's why the liberal education principles aren't precious. The problem with them is they were excluding. We don't want them away. We want them, in fact, a real fact and not just a promise. And we know that under capitalism, colonialism, and patriarchy, they will remain for a long time just a promise. So your role at Cambridge is to keep alive that promise. We are not going to succeed in your lifetime. Believe me, it's very difficult. But keep alive the promise, strengthen, create contradiction, and then the people that will be following you will build upon that. And we'll probably, in the time, we'll have a more convivial Cambridge, convivial Oxford, convivial Coimbra, with the different knowledges of the world. It'll take a long time, but it has to be, is urgent, is civilizatory, but has to start now. So your generation has this responsibility. You are not the first generation. We have been doing that for some time, but you are continuing that beautifully. And when I saw the way you are organizing your journal, I said, my God, sometime we think, well, it's not worth all this effort. But when I say, Basma, your work and your colleagues, I say it pays. I'm feeling completely compensated of my efforts and my work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we just have to hope that we be up to the responsibility and follow the footsteps of yourself and the great work that you do. It's so unfortunate that my 40 minutes are gone now. So it's time to hand over to Naomi. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A from the audience. Over to you, Naomi.
Thank you, Basma. Thank you so much, Professor Santos, for these fascinating reflections, and to Basma for enabling and facilitating this rich conversation. The question box has been very busy in these 40 minutes, as we might have guessed. We've had so many questions for you, Professor Santos, that we might not be able to bring forth all of them in these 15 minutes, but we've selected a few that might represent several common themes and shared concerns across people's different questions. So the first one I will ask you on behalf of the audience is, how does Professor Santos think we should confront an increasingly strident right-wing populism?
Going to put together a couple of questions. Some 3 questions, for instance.
Okay, so a question to pair with this question is, haven't dominance, power differences, and social hierarchy existed since the beginning of human history? At least it exists everywhere in the natural world and the animal world. Is it even possible to imagine a world without dominance or power differences? If so, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Third?
And a third one is, when revaluing epistemologies of the South, do you see a risk of promoting a new form of capitalism with new ways of knowledge? What is the path between recognizing and valuing epistemologies of the South and using them to create cognitive justice in practice?
Well, they are very, very good questions, and we don't have much time. Do we have 15 minutes for all the questions? So I'll be very, I'll respond very.
We can go up to 20 minutes. I think the audience will be patient with us if we go over the limit. So don't worry about time.
Well, the first one, well, that's new. It's, you know, the right wing, it's not new, but the way it is being now much more, you know, much stronger, I would say, in many different, well, particularly in Europe, we can see that. We can see that in throughout the world, as a matter of fact, particularly, well, in India, with Modi. We have seen that in Latin America now. We see that in Europe with the extreme right. So why would we confront them? In fact, it's you know, it's a very difficult struggle because since we are being threatened by this right wing and extreme right wing, particularly, because I distinguish between the conservatives and reactionaries. The conservatives are the ones that you know, go back to the French Revolution. They accept the three values: equality, liberty, and fraternity. Of course, they favor liberty. They don't like the others, but they recognize their you know, secondary type of coexistence with their values. And of course, they want freedom, freedom of commerce, freedom of everything, and freedom for them, not for the others. Of course, that's the liberal ideology in the conservative framework. But then the reactionaries are different because they all, you know, behind the French Revolution. They don't believe in equality. They don't believe in liberty. They don't believe in fraternity. They want hierarchical societies. They don't want, they are racist. They are supremacists. So they are the reactionaries. Well, the reactionaries are becoming very, very strong in the USA, as you know. In Europe, at university level, they are not that strong, but the right wing is there, both as a religious right wing and a secular right wing. Well, I think that we have to confront that, and we have to confront that by avoiding two things. The first one is to fight alone. It's very important that you organize yourself in journals like this one, or in associations. Don't let yourself be isolated in this struggle, because if you are isolated, then you are fully neutralized immediately. They neutralize you, they invent some fake news about you, they cancel you, as they say in the social networks these days. So it is more difficult to cancel an organization. That's the first idea. The second one is don't be tempted to be more conventional, more mainstream in order to protect yourself. That is to say, I'm talking in epistemological, cognitive terms. That is to say, you become more liberal, conventional, mainstream, because if I bring in, you know, vernacular knowledges, Eastern knowledges, other kinds of knowledges, well, I'll be an easy target for these right-wing people, and I'll be left alone. No, don't do that. Try to bring in and to keep alive this struggle, because it's like, I could give you the example now, a very concrete example of the pandemic now. For instance, I've been pleading for the ecology of knowledges, articulation of knowledges, and many people have told me, but Professor Santos now, but there is a pandemic and it's just science. You know, epidemiologists, virologists, and so on. What are the other knowledges, popular knowledges? Because they have been completely omitted, made absent by the current crisis, but they are in the communities. And in the book I've just finished, and I hope will come out by Routledge and in English, and is now in Portuguese and Spanish and Italian, I show the creativity of the communities. How much knowledge, for instance, the indigenous people in Colombia just produced a small manual and a handbook of recipes of the ancient and traditional medicine that helps to create immunity of the people, the bodies, vis-a-vis the coronavirus. Many, you know, the World Health Organization is been talking about the Artemisia, that plant from Madagascar that is it creates an immune system. The ecology of knowledge is all there, because in many communities in the world, believe me, they don't have access to any of the medical knowledges that we are talking about. And vaccines, if they come, it will come very, very late for them in many, many years, because the European Union, for us, and I know that England is now doing the same, they are trying to buy as many vaccines they can to vaccinate their own people. They don't care about people in Africa or in Latin America or whatever. They really don't care. So we have to confront, and never just in epistemological or cognitive terms, we have to be out there in the struggles, because they are also out there. And that's the lesson at this point, is that the streets, the plazas, the squares, where usually people, the indignados and other movements have been together, are not a monopoly of social movements, of progressive social movements, of leftist orientations. The extreme right is mobilizing people to the streets. And in fact, now even more so, because they don't respect social distance or sanitary distance. They don't respect anything. We have seen that in the campaign in the United States. So be aware of that. Movements don't have the monopoly. On the contrary, it may be taken over by the extreme right. So we have to be there and to confront them while it is not too late for us. As to the second problem, well, it's an old problem, and I thank you for the question. It all depends on the hierarchies. Of course, there are hierarchies in society. The problem is the hierarchies that have been developed out of differences that involve social, political, cultural, economic differences. In the tradition of the West, there is no difference that doesn't involve an hierarchy. You know, man and woman, society, nature, white, black, lay, religious. There is a difference and there is a hierarchy. Sometimes it's hidden under the liberal ideology, but it is, of course, an hierarchy. What we want is that the difference remain, but without hierarchies. That is to say, equal differences. Of course, a white person cannot be like a black person. A man cannot be like a woman. Well, there are many different sexes, of course, and there are many transsexual identities and so on. There are differences, but why should there be an hierarchy among them? These are the kind of hierarchies that you can do away with. There are others, of course, that we can and we shouldn't. I mean, between plants and animals, how, you know, a cauliflower defends itself from a wolf. It's difficult for it, right? Or my chicken here if I leave my chicken here and the wolf come, well, it's very difficult. I have to protect them. So there are hierarchies, but there are some in which you can intervene, others we can't. Well, in practice, the third question, very briefly, because I want to have more questions, is that in practice, the epistemologies of the South are not fought and struggled for inside our academic world. They have to be there. I also advise people, well, look at my case. I don't want to, it's not a general case, but it's my experience. My experience is that I try in my life, and for more than 30 years I've been trying to do that, is that because before I was different. I mean, I've been unlearning myself, unthinking myself all along. We should be doing that very often. Today I try to spend 50% of my time at university, engaging with the students and colleagues and so on, and 50% of my time with social movements and organization outside the university that, in fact, with the pandemic are more isolated, but they have also discovered these forms of accessibility. And I was in a meeting with a barriada favela, you know, a squatter settlement in Buenos Aires, a very large one. Well, before I would have to go there. Now we had this meeting about, you know, the pandemic and about the other pandemics of hunger, of other epidemics, of police brutality. There are people that have been subjected to so many pandemics before this one that we have to engage with that. So most of the struggle is outside the university.
Thank you so much, Professor Santos. Is there another part of that question that you wanted to answer? Shall I move on to another one? What do you prefer?
We can three more questions. Is it possible? Or do you want three more questions?
Of course, yes. This
Okay,
audience has been buzzing with questions for you.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So the next one is, I would like to know how we can take on risk in solidarity with our research participants. If we don't, are we complicit in reproducing the inequalities that we pretend to be addressing through our research? What does this say about our ethics and our risk assessment protocols?
Second.
Would you like me to repeat that?
No, a second question and then a third question. Put the three questions. If you have them, if not, I can answer.
The second question is the destruction of knowledge a natural part of society's dynamic interplay between conflict and peace? As struggles are resolved, the need to know the epistemology of struggle is removed, and the knowledge of peace replaces such epistemologies. And a third question, can you please comment on the role of common sense in the Gramscian sense of ordinary people and its role in reinforcing or subverting abyssal thinking and willed ignorance? So you only have about 5 minutes left, Professor Santos, unfortunately, so please take your pick and answer whatever you feel comfortable.
I'll be very brief to these ones. Well, the first one is an enormous question. All of them are wonderful questions. I think our risk assessment have been done by ourselves, and once it is just done by ourselves, we tend to minimize, and we tend to be very pleased by whatever we do, because we don't have a kind of a participatory type of assessment. I think that we have to do that. For instance, I would like to, another occasion to discuss how we do the devolution, for instance, of our work to the communities or to the people with whom we have been working very often. Many people are content to send them or to send them a copy or to have a meeting with them, but never engage in the struggles in which we are in. Sometimes people really are afraid of, I was trained when I was at Yale, when I got my degree, I was trained that we should not intervene in the field because participant observation should be done without intervening in the field. Well, I did all the time. I mean, if I don't intervene when I see some unjust thing being done, I have to intervene. Otherwise, I will be complicit with that. So I think that there are lots of things that we can do, and we have to deal with that very carefully, because sometimes, we have to distinguish very clearly between objectivity and neutrality. We have to respect methodologies, have to participatory methodologies, and we have to go along with them. Of course, we have to engage with them, but then not neutrality. We have to be very clear which side are you on. It's not an easy one, but I always advise my students to engage in a serious discussion on the distinction between objectivity and neutrality, because they are not the same thing at all. The second one is that, I think that the destruction of knowledge, creative destruction was the famous concept by Schumpeter about capitalism, and we have to be destroying. In fact, our epistemologies of science, it tells us that truth does not exist. There is just a search of truth, because if truth existed, it would be always the same. It won't change. But what is true today in scientific terms is not true tomorrow. So it's just a search of truth. And I think this movement is what we have. The ecology of knowledges, for instance, is of course, there are incompatibilities, there are conflicts, and we have to deal with those conflicts. The ecology of knowledges have been developed is not to engage directly in conversation with the oppressors necessarily. What I'm mostly concerned is the lack of conversation among the oppressed people. Because, the indigenous people don't talk to the black Afro-descendant people very often. They don't understand each other. Women with the trade union movement, women's movement, they don't speak. We need ecology of knowledge is there. And there, rather than destruction, there is mutual enrichment of that. I can't go much into that. But the third question, common sense. Of course, in fact, Susan mentioned my book, Toward the New Common Sense. The title was Toward the New Common Sense. And then another edition was Toward the New Legal Common Sense. I start for the common sense in the liberal traditional way in which philosophy of science has dealt with. Common sense is the knowledge from which we develop the truthful, the scientific knowledge. But then this is the conception. But common sense is the knowledge by which lots of people go. But this common sense is very often racist, sexist, capitalist, whatever, right? So we have to struggle for a new common sense. That is to say, it is, well, for Gramsci, it was the concept of hegemony kept that. We have to create hegemony. Hegemony is a new common sense by organic intellectuals, because we go from the civil society, as he says, to the political society, which is not a party system, it's other thing. That is to say, you create a new common sense, which is not a scientific knowledge. It's popular knowledge, but a popular knowledge that is aware of the oppression of domination that has made it popular and has not questioned it. So we have to be critical to all kinds of knowledges, and that creates a new common sense. I advise you, for instance, to read that beautiful book by Odera Uruka, a great Kenyan philosopher, The Sage Philosophy. There he can understand very well how popular knowledge, all the wise knowledge of the sage has to be criticized, and is criticized by them. So they create a common sense. That's what orature always allows us to do every time. So I have to finish, unfortunately, because of a question of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. This has been really, really enriching, and we are so grateful to be able to hear you and to learn from you and to listen to your really valuable reflections and ideas. I'm about to hand over back to my Editor-in-Chief, Basma, now, for just a brief moment to also acknowledge the incredible work she has done in leading CERJ this year and enabling us to have this space. We are all so grateful for the many, many innovations she has pioneered, and we hope that the next leadership team can continue to build on her thoughtful and caring work. So thank you also to Basma as I hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Naomi, for covering this Q&A. And Professor Santos, thank you so much again for your time, for the invaluable thoughts, insights, and pieces of advice that you've just offered us. We're truly so privileged to have had such an inspirational intellectual with us today. Thank you for making CERJ launching event so special and memorable. And we truly hope that we can arrange another event, hopefully soon in Cambridge in person, and we can have longer discussion and longer sessions. We have two parts left today, which is the acknowledgements part and the important part of announcing the award. You're more than welcome, Professor Santos, to stay with us, but at the same time, we certainly understand if you're busy or if you prefer to leave at this point.
Well, if it is just this time that is here, 5 minutes for each, I'll be very glad to be with you until the end of the session.
And we're so honored to have you with us till the end. Thank you so much. And apologies to the audience. I know we're already behind the time, but I'm certain as well and positive that you have been enjoying this conversation with Professor Santos. So as we promised that the session will get more casual now, and I would like to encourage everyone to open your videos. I would love to see your faces. And we have the acknowledgements part and announcing the award part. And I'm doing it the other way around. I decided to do the acknowledgement first because I thought if we announce the award, people might leave. So I would like people to hear the acknowledgements. So I'm kind of forcing you to hear the acknowledgements. Please don't leave. Okay. So of course that this work couldn't have been done without the incredible support of an amazing group of people who have worked closely with me towards launching volume 7. First off, my profound gratitude goes to our incredible sub-editor, Nomisha Kurian. Nomisha, you played a crucial role in providing me with continuous support. You have honestly gone above and beyond your role, and you volunteered a significant amount of your time. You've always been there for me whenever I have a problem, a difficult decision to make. You were always there to support me, to making difficult decisions and uphold the academic integrity of the journal all throughout. So thank you so much, Nomi. And I would ask everyone, when you hear your name, if you would like to say anything, because the point is really, I would love people to see your face. So you could just say hi if you want, so that Zoom shifts to your face. Or you can say something more if you would like, as long as you keep it really, really brief. Nomi, would you like to say anything? I think people have seen you, but you can also say anything if you want.
Oh, thank you so much, Basma. I'm very grateful to have gotten to be part of CERJ's efforts this year. Also, I want to add a few other awesome details about Basma's leadership, because I didn't get to say everything I wanted to say in the interest of time, but I would like to flag to our whole community here that 2 or 3 really outstanding things Basma has done this year, among others, is that she has led a lot of innovations to make CERJ more professional. So this has included substantial reworkings of the way the journal is presented, little things like having an ARC ID linked to authors, things like having citations in the professional style of journals in our field. And she's also led an innovation towards the oralization of knowledge by encouraging authors to produce a film or a little video summarizing their research. I think all Basma's efforts integrated together make for a very creative and rich and highly professionalized version of CERJ. So I'm really excited to be part of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nomi. And like I said, none of this could have been achieved without the support of you and everyone else. We have 3 more members of the sub-editors team, Dr. Terence Bevington, Dr. Hiba Salem, and Dr. Luke Roberts. Thank you so much for the invaluable support that you have offered me. Terence, Hiba, and Luke very recently finished their PhDs, so I would like to say congratulations to everyone again. And thank you so much for contributing your expertise and the skills to CERJ over this year. Terence, Hiba, and Luke, if you are with us. Terence, are you with us, Terence? Luke?
Yes, I am.
Oh, Terence, here you are. Come on. Would you like to say anything, Terence?
Do you know what, Basma? It was great. I learned so much, actually, that informed my own research from doing this, you know, in terms of being part of the field. So thank you for the opportunity. And it really sharpened my own skills. So I gained as much as I gave. So thank you.
Thank you, Terence. Luke Roberts, is Luke with us?
Okay. Right, hi. You can see there's a little person with me. She's conducting an experiment as we speak. So I'd just like to say, no, it's a real pleasure. And it's really interesting being on the other side and being the editor and going, oh, am I being too harsh? Am I being too critical? And at other points going, actually, this person is not making any sense at all. So it's not just in my head. So I really value that. And I hope my own writing will improve because of the opportunity that was given. So thank you very much, Basma and Naomi.
Thank you, Luke. Hiba Salem, are you with us, Hiba?
Hi, yes, I just want to repeat everything and say that it's been a real pleasure and I've learned a lot as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Hiba. I also acknowledge with gratitude the work of Helena Fernandez. Helena is the deputy editor of the journal, and she certainly provided me with essential support as a deputy editor. Helena, you will cover the last part, but I would also love to see your face now if you are. Would you like to say something?
Just thank you so much for all the support. I've really enjoyed working with you, Basma, and I think you've really set the bar high for the next team. I think you've demonstrated excellent leadership skills with running the journal, and your innovative ideas have also contributed greatly to the new volume. I want to echo what Nomi has said. I agree with everything. So it's been a pleasure, and Thank you.
Elena, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you. Giovanna Lucy served as a communication officer last year, but she also offered an incredible support to CERJ in this last month. And her support over just 1 month really made a great difference. So I'm so grateful to Giovanna Lucy. Giovanna, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm happy to be here for another year, and I'm so proud of this year's team. I think you have done an amazing work. It's incredible to see how much the journal has developed during this year and become another different thing and reached another level. So thank you. You have been outstanding and overcame all the expectations that last year's team had for you. So I'm really happy to be here and to be a part of this.
Thank you, Giovanna. And we certainly couldn't have done anything if we haven't received CERJ in a great position, because CERJ was great with Volume 6, with what you and Liz have done. So thank you so much. William McInerney is a very close colleague and a friend of mine, and William also assisted us with the final stages of the proofreading. He reviewed my editorial notes, and he has always been there. So he reviewed the structure of this session, because whenever I have a problem, I just reach out to William. So, Will, thank you so much. Are you with us, Will?
Yes, I'm here, Basma, and thanks so much for the acknowledgement and the kind words. And I would just like to echo a lot of what we heard here, is to acknowledge the great appreciation that many of us in this community have for your leadership inside and outside of the university. And thanks for all the tremendous work that you do, and it shows very clearly, as we have seen here today.
Thank you, Will. So lovely to see you. Camila Hadi Chaudhary also deserves my thanks today, because she also assisted us in the last stages of the proofreading. Camila, are you here?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Basma. It was a wonderful opportunity to be a part of it, and I enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And also want to say thank you to Professor Santos, because I'm having a real fan moment this evening. So thank you very much. I learned so much today.
Thank you, Camila. Dr. Hilary Crimmon, she's my supervisor, and Professor Ricardo Sabetz, my advisor. They were always so supportive of CERJ work, and they offered me important and timely advice. Dr. Hilary Crimmon, she assisted me when I was struggling with making a decision on a paper. She also reviewed my editorial note. Professor Ricardo Sabetz, I was going in a very wrong direction at the beginning. I remember I came to your office and I asked you a couple of questions, and your answers really helped me a lot. Now, when I think back, I think like, I'm so grateful I asked you, or else I could have gone in a totally, completely, possibly wrong direction. So thank you so much, Hilary and Ricardo. Hilary, are you with us?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am beyond proud, Basma, of everything that you've achieved, and so many members of our Cambridge Peace Education Research Group community are represented here today, and just what you're doing here is stellar, so inspirational. I'm incredibly proud, and I am so grateful for Professor Santos for speaking with us today. I'm one of your biggest fans, and I recommend your work to all of my students. So thank you so much. Really, it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. And yes, she does recommend your work. I first knew about your work through Hilary. So yeah, thank you, Hilary. Professor Ricardo, are you with us?
Yes, hi, Basma, I'm with you. And for me, I would like to say that in pretty much the words of Professor Santos in terms of cognitive justice, it is not about, for me, is what I learned from you, is what I learned from our students, is what I learned from Persa. And I would like to thank all of you for continuing to push me and to push us into opening much more critical debates in our epistemologies. And like Hilary said, I'm incredibly proud of all of you our students and everybody who contributed to the Volume 7. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. My big thanks also certainly go to Professor Susan Robertson for her ongoing support to the journal and for being, Professor Susan has been serving as the senior advisor for CERJ. So whenever we have any problem, any issue, she's always there to support us. And I still remember in the first term, Professor Susan, you delivered a session to the graduate community in collaboration with Dr. Lewis Gandon. And in that session, you afforded us a great opportunity to promote CERJ, and you provided guidelines and very essential and important tips on publishing for new authors. We are so grateful for you, Professor Susan, and we're grateful to Dr. Lewis Gandon. Professor Susan, I don't know, would you like to say something after now, after we finish the session with Professor Susan? Sorry, with Professor Santos.
I don't think she's here.
She left?
I can't find her.
Dr. Lewis Gandon, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful afternoon for me in Brazil. I'm in Brazil, and to listen to my old friend Boaventura Santos. It was a pleasure to listen to his talk. And I want to say that it has been a pleasure to actually be with you in Cambridge, in which looks like 20 years ago in a different world. To witness your vibrant community as CERJ. Congratulations for your work.
Thank you, Louis. We are greatly indebted to Dr. Kevin Kester for delivering an online training session where he provided our peer reviewers with some essential guidelines. Kevin, I truly and strongly believe that this session that you delivered had made a great difference. It set the right foundation for the very high quality and thorough and constructive reviews that we have later received. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation in the second term to deliver this session and for making a great difference. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Basma, and thank you, Professor Santos, for your comments today. And hello to everybody from the future. I'm coming at 4 a.m. here in Seoul, and it's been my pleasure to spend this evening with all of you. Thank you, Basma.
Thank you, Kevin. And of course, all thanks go to all the anonymous peer reviewers. I can see some very familiar names. We had 40 peer reviewers this year. All the names are acknowledged on the website. So thank you everyone for every single one who volunteered and served as a peer reviewer this year and generously offered their time and expertise. And also the effort of the translators. I know that a large number of the translators were also from our faculty, and maybe they're with us today. Thank you so much for translating CERJ abstracts into Spanish and Arabic. That's really highly appreciated. We're so grateful to FIRSA community, particularly Anna Perkis. I think Anna told me she might not be here. And Lindsay Burton, thank you so much, Lindsay, for all your support. You've always been there to support us. And thank you so much to Liz Killen. Liz Killen is the previous editor. I had like a million questions throughout this year, and she had always been there to answer all my questions. Liz Killen, are you with us? I don't think she's...
I don't see her.
Okay. Finally, also in this last month, Lakshmi Bose was helping us in the communication. So thank you so much, Lakshmi. Kongsin Lee and Gambu Wang also, they were helping in the communication and the event side. So I'm so grateful to them. Finally, we're so grateful to the graduate community who elected us this year. Thank you so much for this opportunity to serve as the editorial team of this volume. I think I will stop here and I will hand over to Helena, who will be covering the award part. Over to you, Helena.
Yes, we come to the exciting part. So I want to tell about the award that we have. So the CRB award, the purpose is to acknowledge exceptional work submitted to us. And we decide on this award based on some criteria. So we are looking for well-articulated, engaging, innovative, and significant articles. And it was quite hard to choose an article to win this award because we really enjoyed reading all the articles and we think that they've made such a significant contribution. I'm going to show a video, a 1-minute video of all the authors' names, photos, and the title of their articles before announcing the winner. So please bear with me. Here we go. So I hope you enjoyed this 1-minute video. This was to acknowledge all of the contributions by the authors. And now to announce the winner. So this year's winner goes to Emily Rushton with her article. Let me just find it. Here we go. Speaking through a dead bird, using art for emotional and communicative accessibility in an A-level classical literature classroom. So congratulations to Emily Rushton. The award will be an Amazon voucher, so that will be sent to you shortly. And we have another surprise. So as you know, this year we tried to include video articles. This was because we wanted to make the knowledge more accessible to the audience. And we really admired this. All the authors contributed to this. And this has made the knowledge produced more accessible to the masses that may not be from an academic background. So in order to thank you for this, we have another award. So we decided on the best video. And this award is going to Ryan and Maria. So I would like, if we have time, I would like to show the video that they have produced. Do we have time, Basma?
I think we're already way beyond the time that we set. But the thing is, with the first video that you've played, it was somehow blurred on my end. Was it only me who was seeing it blurred? Because of the second video going to face the same. So you saw the first video, it was okay? Okay, then it's in my end. You can play the second one. We're already beyond time. And it's such an incredible video. I really loved it. So I would love everyone to see it.
Yeah, okay, so let me just open it. Hopefully it will be okay. Okay, here we go.
My name is Ryan Irvin. I'm beginning my PhD in education at the University of Cambridge. I'm a former teacher with a master's in educational leadership and a master's in psychology and education.
Greetings everyone, I'm Dr. Maria Tappoli and I'm the co-author of the CERJ review paper titled The Role of Inhibitory Control in Achievement in Early Childhood Education.
Early childhood education is important for students' health, well-being, and intellectual development. There is widespread evidence to suggest that children participating in early childhood education programs benefit cognitively and develop the tools they need to succeed in future schooling and later in life. This review paper explores the relationship between achievement in early childhood education and inhibitory control. Inhibitory control is the ability to regulate emotions, behavior, and thoughts to reach a desired goal. Early childhood is an important time in the development of executive functions and the prefrontal cortex. Executive functions help people achieve goals and is often referred to as inhibitory control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility.
So that was just a little preview. The full video will be up on our YouTube channel along with the other videos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go Helena.
No, I just want to say that we were really impressed with the video, and well done, congratulations. You will receive your Amazon voucher very shortly. Over to you, Basma.
Thank you so much, Helena. And just would like to say that Emily Rushton, I'm not sure if she's with us. Are you with us, Emily? I think she's not with us. Emily Rushton and Ryan, you will... Oh, you're with us.
Hello, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I am here.
Emily, congratulations on the award. You will receive a certificate and an acknowledgement letter of this award signed by the editorial team and by Professor Susan Robertson. Your paper was so great and special, and the award is certainly well deserved. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. And just, I know we're so over time, but I just want to say thank you so much, because I am a perfect example of someone who cannot present their knowledge in the academic way that most other people can. And I was really helped through it. So it really means a lot to me that everyone took the time to read and help me with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Ryan, you just impressed all of us with this video. I asked you to do videos, but you just like went way beyond my expectations. So thank you so much for the time and the effort that you put in this video. Would you like to say anything, Ryan or Maria, because this is a co-authored paper?
I guess I'll start since I was unmuted. Again, as everyone else is saying, it's really an honor to take part in it. The MPhil last year was my first year here in Cambridge, and I feel like it's been a really warm welcome. It's nice being part of a community. And now that I'm working on my PhD, I look forward to getting to know people, whether it's here through Zoom or maybe someday in the future in person. Thank you for giving me something to do over the lockdown as well.
Thank you, Ryan. You'll also receive an acknowledgement letter and a voucher, like Helena said. Professor Santos has just texted me that he's leaving us now. Professor Santos, would you like to say anything before you leave us?
Activate, yeah. I just want to say goodbye. I want to thank you once again, Basma, and all of you for being here. And this wonderful afternoon, I wish you well. And I'm impressed by the work I've seen. I'm very glad that I stayed. I always like to stay for this part in which the students are showing what they are doing, because that's the future. So thank you so much, and let's stay in touch. Bye-bye, all of you, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Take care and stay safe. All right, I think we're concluding this session now. The very last thing I will say is that I will say congratulations for the new editorial team that has been elected very recently. We have Meng Liu was elected as the chief editor, Ciara McFall, is it Ciara or Kiara? I don't know, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, as the deputy editor, Maggie Nelson, the business manager, and Nayana Badmanbhan as the communication officer. Congratulations everyone for new roles. And if Meng Liu here, Meng Liu, are you here?
I can only see Maggie.
Veronica, are you Meng Liu, Veronica? Oh, okay, maybe you need to unmute her, Helena.
Oh, I see.
Meng Liu, congratulations on your role, Chief Editor. I'm so looking forward to handing over the work to you on Monday. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Basma. And hello, everyone. I'm Meng. I'm a third-year PhD student. I know it's late, so I'll be really brief. I've got to admit that this year's team has really set the bar high. And my initial excitement of getting the job has morphed into a huge sense of pressure. And, so today's event is really like thought-provoking for me. Even though my own research is not on post-colonial studies, I particularly enjoy the idea of cognitive justice. And it has certainly given me a lot to reflect on, not just my own research, but also like how to help CERJ continue to play a responsible role to raise awareness, to help redress the injustice that many of us have been subject to. But luckily, I'm not alone in this. I've been joined by many wonderful team members, and I'm confident that we're gonna be a strong team and carry on the good work from this year. So thank you.
Yes.
And let's look forward to Volume 8, I guess, yeah.
I'm certain you'll do great work, and I'm certain that CERJ is in safe hands. Congratulations again, and I'm really looking forward to see what the future holds for CERJ. You're certainly not alone. We're always available to support the new team, and you're just going to do incredible work. So thank you so much, and congratulations. And thank you everyone for being with us today. I'm so incredibly sorry for going way beyond time. That was like so not expected. I hope you enjoyed this session. And yeah, stay well, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.